Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings here on Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I want to thank you so very, very much for joining me, being a part of this. Let me ask you, please hit the subscribe button. We need subscribers, okay? Like I mentioned to you, my goal for 2025 is to reach 10,000 subscribers. We're currently setting, pardon me, good coffee this morning. We're currently setting at somewhere around 8,800 subscribers. It continues to inch up, inch up, inch up, and I want to reach that goal, all right? Because the more people that we can reach, the more people come to understand the faithfulness of God. The more people understand how Christ answers his own challenge, the challenge of Christ. And therefore, the more people are equipped to deal with atheists, to deal with agnostics, to deal with Muslims and Jews, all of whom say, well, Jesus said he was going to come back in the first century and he didn't do it. Therefore, he's not the Son of God. The Bible is not his word. And let me say this again. If you have not yet encountered someone who teaches that, who rejects Jesus because of that, you better hang on. And probably you've been living in somewhat of a sheltered world. All right? Just last year, 2024, I had two major formal debates on the internet with atheists, men who said Jesus failed. And a lot of that, most of it, as a matter of fact, has to do with the fact that everyone who claims that Jesus failed, and even this morning, just before I came into the studio to do this video, I was on the internet. Someone sent me a private message with a link to a guy who said he was once a Christian, but now he is a raving atheist. The Bible is just nonsense. Jesus Christ is not the Son of God, and on and on and on. His little video was probably about 10 minutes long. I watched about the first 3 or 4 minutes of it, and I just thought, well, here is another classic example of people who do not understand hermeneutic. Hermeneutic is the science of biblical or literary interpretation. And this guy was lifting text out of their historical context, out of their limited historical context, and trying to make them apply to today. Not realizing there are some things that applied 2,000 years ago that do not apply now. But he was trying to make them apply. And yet, I suppose if I were to ask this guy, okay, here you are rejecting Jesus because of what he said to a group of men in John chapter 14 specifically. And yet, because you cannot do what they did, that means that Jesus was a liar. Because after all, you're applying John 14 to you today. Well, let's go back to Genesis chapter 6. God told Noah, I'm going to bring rain on the earth. And there's going to be a flood. There had never been a flood before. So Noah, you got to build an ark. Here's how you're going to do it. I'm going to save you and your household. So when it starts raining, gather your kids, gather your family into the ark. Now, should we today go to Genesis chapter 6 and say, oh my goodness gracious, we got to build an ark. There's going to be a flood. And you would go, oh, come on, Preston. That's such an anachronistic application of Scripture. And you would be absolutely right. There was a limited, temporally delimited application. It was going to be in Noah's day. Well, in John chapter 14, Jesus was speaking specifically to his apostles, giving them the promise. Same thing, pardon me. And that promise was limited to the first century generation. Same thing in James chapter 5. The point of it is, this guy lost his faith because he was obviously taught and instructed in a denomination that said, if it said it then it's true now. Well, there are certain things that are eternal. Certain things are unchanging. The nature of God, the nature of morality. Some things were temporary. And his failure to understand that led to his loss of faith. So what I've been trying to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, here on Now TV for the last, almost 3 years now, I think. I'm terrible at remembering time. Anyway, what I've been sharing with you is how, number one, we have the challenge of Christ. Number two, that challenge of Christ had to do with the time of his coming. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death. They won't die until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. That meant those people standing there 2,000 years ago were going to live to see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom and judgment. Now that's a problem. Let me reiterate this, that's a problem if Jesus was predicting that he was going to come back at the end of human history, and he was going to come out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man riding on the clouds, accompanied by angels, to burn up the earth, to raise all the dead who had ever died. Well, pretty obviously, that did not happen in the first century in the lifetime of those people. And so people go through all sorts of theological and verbal gymnastics to try to explain that away. Well, some standing here doesn't mean those people back then. Not really. Or shall not taste of death means they will not taste of spiritual death until they see the Son of Man coming. Really? No. If they rejected him while they were alive, they were condemned already. John chapter 3. So people go to all sorts of, dramatic argumentum ad desperatum in order to escape the force of what Jesus said. The key, ladies and gentlemen, as I've been sharing with you, is to understand that Jesus never predicted that he was going to come back in a physical body as a 5'5" Jewish man at the end of time, because the Christian age has no end. That alone should settle the issue. But I've been sharing with you how Jesus said he was going to come in the glory of the Father, which meant he was going to come as the Father had come before. And the Father had never, ever, ever come literally, physically, or visibly out of heaven riding the literal clouds. No. He came by means of utilizing in his sovereignty one nation to judge another. Please just go back and look at some of the videos in which I explain this. This is the only way that we can affirm that Christ fulfilled his own challenge of John chapter 10:37. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. That's the challenge of Christ. Okay. For the last 3 videos, last 3 weeks, I've been sharing with you the idea of Abraham, Father Abraham, and the invisible resurrection. And I got to tell you, this is one of the most powerful, one of the most incredible, and yet commonly overlooked concepts. Here's what we have. by way of very quick reiteration. In Isaiah chapter 25, we have the prediction of the establishment of what is known as the Messianic banquet. On this mountain, that's Mount Zion, the Lord shall make a great feast, a feast of wine on the lees, a feast of fat things. Verse 8, that's verse 6. Verse 8, and the Lord shall swallow up death, and he will remove the veil that is spread over all the nations. This is resurrection. And it would take place at the day in which the Lord would establish the Messianic resurrection banquet. So, here's what you've got to understand. This is one of those things you've got to catch the power of it. Messianic banquet. Some like to call it the Messianic wedding banquet. I like that. It's accurate. It's biblical. Because at the time of the wedding, the remarriage between Yahweh and Israel, guess what? It would be the time of the making of the new covenant. Now that's incredibly important because Israel was alienated through violation of the covenant. Israel would be reinstated, restored by the making of the new covenant. This is why I call it, and others, covenant eschatology. Because the eschatology of the Bible is about the end of covenantal alienation or sin alienation, and God giving a new covenant whereby mankind could be reconciled, restored, and resurrected. Covenant eschatology. The end of one covenant, the institution of the new covenant. And people want to focus on biology. They want to focus on flesh and not standing. And folks, I'm sorry, that is not the biblical story of eschatology. Okay, I've got to hurry here. I get so wrapped up in demonstrating the covenantal nature of eschatology. By the way, this goes back to the garden. Man was put in a garden. He had an agreement with God, tend all of the trees, tend the garden, work in the garden. But of every fruit of every tree you may freely eat, but of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you will not eat, because in the day you eat thereof you shall surely die. What would happen on the day that he would die? He would lose the garden. He would be cast out of the garden. He violated his covenant with Yahweh. I'll tend the garden. I'll eat the fruit that I'm allowed to eat. I will not eat the fruit I'm forbidden to eat. Oh, but wait, Eve goes, oh boy, that fruit looks good. It would taste good. Make me wise. Here, Adam, have a bite. Violation of covenant, leading to alienation. Now, this was before Torah. This was before the law of Moses. It was before Israel. But it was a covenant relationship that was severed, violated. And as a result of that, man was alienated from God. He died. Being in sin means to be spiritually dead, covenantally dead. Okay, like I said, I've got to go on. So over the last few weeks, I've been sharing with you a marvelous passage, Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. Here is Jesus. He's just cast the demon out of a child, just done other miracles. And a centurion approaches him. Now, folks, you really have to understand the significance of what's happening here. If you remember in Acts chapter 10, when Peter was told to go down to the the house of Cornelius. And he comes in to the house of Cornelius. Cornelius was a Roman centurion. He was not an Israelite. You know, our attempts are made to try to prove that Cornelius must have been a non-Torah observant Israelite. That's nonsense. There is no proof for it whatsoever. Peter begins talking to them and he says, you know how it is unlawful for a man that is a Jew to have company with or to eat with a man that is a Gentile. Now look, folks, it was not against the law for a Jew to have conversation, to eat with an Israelite, especially if they desired to bring them back to the faith, you know, to restore them to Israel. That was never against the law. But Peter said, it's unlawful for me, a Jew, to come in to eat with you, a Gentile. You get the same thing in John chapter 4. Jesus speaking to the woman at the well. She's a Samaritan. She is a half-breed Israelite. And Jesus asked for a drink of water. The woman is absolutely astounded. And she goes, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask of me, a Samaritan, for a drink of water? The Jews have nothing to do with Samaritans because they were half-breeds. They were not considered full Israelites. The diaspora Israelites were considered Israelites. So what's my point? In Matthew chapter 8, we have the centurion. Someone suggested to me recently that the centurion was probably an Israelite. Well, now at a later period of time, in the 3rd century in the Roman Empire, there were in fact some Jews who joined the Roman army. But that was a couple of centuries later. By and large, it was unknown for a Jew to be a ranking member in the Roman army. So that claim that the centurion was probably an Israelite just won't fly. There is no historical or biblical evidence to support that. So anyway, Jesus is walking along and the centurion approaches him and says, Master, my servant lies grievously ill at home. He is stricken with the palsy. Some translations render it, that he was having fits, convulsions. And Jesus said, I will come and heal him. And the centurion goes, no. You don't have to come. Speak the word. Now, why is the centurion saying you don't have to come? Well, it goes back to that we find in Acts chapter 10. Not lawful for a man that's a Jew to go into the house of a pagan, of a non-Jew. It wasn't illegal to go into the house of an Israelite, especially to help them. And so the master, this centurion, cognizant of this great social divide between Jews and Romans, said, no, master, you don't have to come. Just speak the word and my servant will be healed. And Jesus responds by saying, I have not found in all of Israel such a great faith. Now watch this, folks. If the centurion was an Israelite, then Jesus's words are totally inappropriate. Why do I say that? Because if the Israelite, if the centurion was an Israelite, then Jesus should have said, this is the greatest faith in Israel that I've found. This is awesome. This is great faith in Israel. Didn't do that, did he? Didn't say that, did he? I have not found such a great faith, no, not in all of Israel. There is no question this man was a, quote, pagan, unquote. And Jesus said to this man, verily I say unto you, one of the strongest affirmations in the Greek, many shall come from the east and the west and shall sit down with Isaac and with Jacob in the kingdom, and the sons of the kingdom shall be cast out. Now, I want to read to you because I find this translation rather interesting and pretty accurate, to be honest about it. Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. Let me back up to verse 10. Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. See what I mean? This man is not in Israel. He's not an Israelite. Okay, I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while, meaning at the same time, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I've only got a few minutes left here for today's show. I want to address a couple of things, and then next week I'm going to do my best to bring this home by showing us exactly when Jesus said this messianic resurrection feast was going to be established. Now, it's right there in the text, especially in the New Revised Standard that I just read. Okay, there's no question about it. But let me address something else first. Okay, this is a little bit off topic, although not totally. Jesus said, "Men will come from the east and west shall sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom, while the sons of the kingdom are cast out. There shall be weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth." Now, folks, listen. Many commentators say, well, this has obviously got to be talking about the end of time because they're going to be weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth. It's talking about people being cast into eternal hellfire. I used to believe that. I used to believe that is accurate. No. Number one, that this kingdom was going to be established on earth. And the sons of the kingdom, their rejection would be manifested on earth when they, as the persecutors of God's children, i.e. the Christians, would be persecuted on earth. And they were going to be cast out of the kingdom for persecuting the saints. In Galatians chapter 4, 22 and following, Paul, in his very first epistle, it's generally believed, and I think accurately so, said, what does the scripture say? And he tells a parable, or an allegory actually. And he said, Abraham had two sons, and he had two women. One was his wife, one was a bondwoman. And there were two sons. Those two women and those two sons represented two distinct people and two distinct covenants. The children of the bondwoman, i.e. Hagar, represented, Paul said, the children of the flesh who are in bondage with her children at the present time. They represented the, quote, Jerusalem that now is and is in bondage with her children. And that was in Paul's day. Hagar represented Jerusalem and the old covenant. the children of the bride, the children of the wife, the children of promise, i.e., Isaac, were the new covenant people, the spiritual seed of Abraham, the children of promise. Now, Paul continues by saying, as it was then, as it was when then? As it was in the days of Abraham. Well, Hagar was jealous of Isaac, and he taunted him. That was a form of persecution. And so Paul says, as it was then, the children of the flesh persecuted the children of the promise. So what does the scripture say? Paul queries. He says, cast out the bondwoman and her son. For the children of the bondwoman, now who are the bondwoman? Jerusalem that then was when Paul was writing, and her sons, Israel after the flesh. Children of the bondwoman shall not be heirs with the children of the Spirit. Who are the children of the Spirit? New covenant Christians. Here's what you got to catch for this, and I really got to hurry here. I've only got about a minute left. Paul says the children of the bondwoman, old covenant Israel, was to be cast out the bondwoman and her son. Why? Because as it was then, so it is now, children of the flesh were persecuting the children of the Spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, old covenant Israel was to be cast out of God's presence, cast out of her covenant for persecuting the new covenant saints, the Christians. And people want to tell us, oh, old covenant Israel was cast off at the cross. No, she wasn't. Old covenant Israel had not been and was not persecuting the church at the cross or at Pentecost. And I am completely out of time. See you next week.